where you really go down the rabbit hole of artificial intelligence and you think about that, right? Because it's like you look at we're at a point right now where there's already more machines than there are people, right?
Okay,
And
yeah.
so, and the more we do that, the more essentially the more processing power we have. And now
Mm-hmm.
we have this other thing of inputs, right? So there's cameras literally everywhere. There's more
Everywhere.
eyes than there are, people. Again, so
Yeah,
we
right,
look
right.
at all the inputs that are coming in, and what's the rate of that? It's only growing. It's probably going to continue to grow.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. This is where we discuss current events, personal growth, and any other random topic that crosses our minds. Our goal is to have a meaningful discussion that help us to see the topics we discuss more clearly. Our hope is we can help you expand your self-awareness, develop your critical thinking, and learn to be less reactive to the world around you. And most importantly, remember, be curious. If you like what you hear, like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any feedback, please leave a comment. We want to hear what you think.
Chris, guess what day it is, Chris?
It is Podcast Friday.
That's right, Chris. And guess what else? We have a very special guest today.
Yes,
His
we
name is
do.
Tony from our Toastmasters group. We just keep recruiting from Toastmasters.
Tony's from Toastmasters.
That's right.
Challenger 734.
So, hey, Tony,
Yeah.
why don't you introduce yourself? Because people may not know who you are.
Absolutely. Yeah, my name is Tony Chago. I am, as you mentioned, part of Challenger 734, and that is one of the many things that I'm up to in the world. Public speaking is part of my overall vision, what I get to create. And so thank you for having me on. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah, you're welcome. This is going to be fun. So, what are we going to talk about today? Because I've got a few topics in mind.
Well, we can talk about real estate, AI, and Tony's pretty open to talk about anything else too, I think. So,
Well, let's talk about AI. I'm been obsessed with AI.
yeah,
And
AI, buzzword.
AI. We always have we had a really big event, and this will be probably delayed a couple weeks, but we had a big event with Elon Musk introducing Grok, however you pronounce it,
Grok.
4. So that is fascinating. And I think I'm going to probably buy it tonight and just start playing around with it, the $30 version of it. So, Tony, what's your take on AI? What are you doing with AI, if anything?
Yeah, well, it's one of those things that for a while there, I was immensely trying to keep up with every single update. And it
Yeah.
seems like by the week, it's become a lot more challenging to do that.
Yeah.
And unless I'm literally working in that industry and like there's the growth is so fast and constant that it's not, I've kind of given up on keeping up with all the updates now. So I heard a little bit about Grok 4, not tested it, not played with it. It's been one of those things where as I see the value of it, like where keeping up with it is, but
Yeah.
to the extent of as much as I can fit within my life at the moment. And I would say in the curve of adoption, I'm not on the bleeding edge, but I'm a little bit on the early adopters.
Okay, that's cool. So you have a ChatGPT account, I think, right?
Oh yeah, I've had one
That's
for
the
quite
gateway
some
drug.
time.
That's where everyone starts, right? So then it just starts getting worse and worse, the addiction from there.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, that's really cool. So I've been trying to figure out how AI like quote thinks or something. And so I watched a ton of videos on it, try to start to learn how large language models work. But then what I started doing is I'm just gonna have AI teach me. And so most of the time I just spend this very iterative process, just going back and forth for like hours at a time. And I'm starting to understand how it works a little bit, because typically if you try to understand the nature of something, if you understand it, now you can understand what it can do and what it can't do, which I think is really cool. And it definitely gets a lot of stuff wrong. It lies, it argues, it does all sorts of, stuff. So, yeah. So,
But
anyways,
that's really interesting because, one of the things that really got me into the rabbit hole of large language models,
yeah,
I read a book called Scary Smart. If
okay.
have either of you guys read it?
Mm-mm.
Highly recommended if you're into AI. It was by the guy. His name's Mo Gaddit. He was one of the chief engineering officers at Google X, which is like their experimental lab. So he was
Okay.
there in the very early days when, a lot of these large language models, like how they were created, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he talks a lot about like that specifically. But what I really like about the book is, anybody can read it or listen to it, and he puts it into really simple terms that, anybody can understand,
Yeah.
breaking it down. Long story short, right? It's built on how we think as humans,
Yeah.
trying to mimic that to a certain extent. So a lot of it, to be quite honest, we don't know how it actually learns because we don't know how we learn. We
Yeah.
know parts of it, but we don't. Nobody could really tell you how you learn something because that is the same way that these models were built,
Yeah. It's
which is
hard
sort
to,
of the
hard to
scary
predict.
part.
Yeah.
Part of the
Yeah.
scary part of Scary Smart.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely not deterministic, which is sort of weird. You can ask her the same question 5 times, you get 5 different answers, which is so interesting.
Well,
And,
I had an issue today because there was an error. I was getting I was asking a question how to do something to it.
yeah.
How do I connect my Gmail to my I think it was Claude that I was
Mhm.
asking. And it, or maybe it was chat, I don't remember which one. And it said, "Oh, you can't do that." I said, "Well, it's an option right here on the interface." And it goes,
Yeah.
"Oh, you're right, you can do that."
Yeah.
Right? And then I said, "Yeah, so what apps can I connect?" And it said, "I don't know. Tell me what you got." And I gave it a snapshot and it showed like 4 or 5 apps that you can connect. And then
Yeah.
it says, "Oh, you're right. You can connect blank, 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 and blank." And it read exactly what was on the list. I said, "Are you just repeating back the information I gave you, or are you
Yeah.
looking at the internet and getting new information and
Yeah.
actually, making sure that what I said was correct?" And
Yeah.
so I'm just telling you what you told me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that doesn't help me at all because when you say something, I'm assuming you're going to the internet to find information and give
Yeah.
it back to me. And you weren't. You were just taking and regurgitating what I told you.
Well, Chris, there's an old saying about assuming things. It never ends well.
Makes an ass out of you, I know.
Exactly.
Well,
And
that's what
it's
that's what I was going to say. One of the scary parts is for the longest time, because I've been tracking this stuff for a while. The scary part was many people thought the day that you actually let one of these large language models go out to the internet and look things up, like you just
yeah,
mentioned, would
yeah,
be the day like all hell breaks loose
yeah,
because now you're letting this model have access to essentially unlimited resources and information.
yeah,
And so for a long time, like I don't know if you were on ChatGPT in the early days, but it had no connection to the internet. It was built on like a 2021 model
yeah,
that
Yep.
pulled from the internet, but it had no way to go out in the web and search
yeah,
for anything.
yeah,
And it's kind of like once that happened, it's like now, we're assuming that's happening, but I think a lot of the models are still built where they're they you kind of have to almost explicitly tell it that
yeah,
because they don't quite understand that
Well,
yet.
that's
yeah,
why I like to ask it what sources it's pulling from. And they've all the LLMs have gotten really good at showing you the links that they're pulling from. But the thing is, they also have a tendency to make some of those things up. So you need to
mhm,
click on them and actually go to the link. If it's
yeah,
something that's important that you get right, if it's just information that you're just spouting out or whatever, or it's building on something you already know, maybe it's not such a big deal. But if it's something that you're actually tying value to, or someone's life to, or something that you're making money off of, you probably want to make sure it's accurate before you use it.
yeah. Well, and
Right.
everybody thinks that they call it hallucinating, right? And I don't quite understand technically how that means, but you got to figure it's not like people are going around like giving good information. Most of the time, people are spouting out nonsense out of their mouth, anyways. So it's like it
Yeah.
learned from us, so of course that's what it's going to
Well,
be.
there's also other kinds of biases it has, right? Like
Yeah,
if something gets quoted in the news 1,000 times, it's not 1,000 times more realistic or more accurate. But what ends up happening is AI sees it 1,000 times, and now it gets more weight because it's seeing it multiple times out in the
yeah,
wild.
yeah, right.
So it's
Yeah,
it's
Yeah.
kind of crazy from that aspect. Is you can have one incorrect piece of information get repeated, and that becomes the truth.
Well, that's the essence of marketing, Chris. I know for a fact if I just keep repeating the same thing over and over again, the person, especially when I can get them young, especially when I can get them like maybe start at 2 or 3 or 4 years old, actually, they will. This is the absolute truth down from God, and there's nothing that will change it.
Yeah. So in that sense, marketing is a form of grooming.
Yeah, of course, manipulation, intent. I mean,
So
however you want to define it. Yeah.
grooming is the term we use now for that negative kind of brainwashing, right? So it's grooming.
Okay.
You're grooming them.
Grooming.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, Chris, we're all brainwashed, right? All of us. It just
No,
determines
just you.
how, except for Chris. He's a standout on this one.
The question is just who brainwashed you, really?
Yeah. What information are you putting into your
Saturday
your
morning
head?
cartoons.
There you go. There you go. And so that's what you got to be really careful of. And this is one of the points of this podcast is what we're seeing happening is that with the addition of like cell phones and texting and tweets, literally people are getting dumber and dumber and dumber, having less ability to think. And I saw a guy, I can't remember where it was from, MIT. I was watching the YouTube video, and he said what's happening as well is people are getting less and less creative because they're giving away their control to this thing. And they're like, okay, I guess if I don't really even know how to get to the grocery store, I've been there 100 times and I could not drive there by myself. So I got to plug in the address every single time into Google and it just takes me there perfectly.
Yeah.
And,
Well, how many phone numbers do you know today?
I know probably 3 or 4, but that's
Yeah.
it.
There was a time you probably knew dozens, if not more.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
Yeah.
so that's an interesting concept though, because that's where I almost disagree with how, AI and technology serves us versus where it doesn't. Because do I feel like I'm better off memorizing hundreds of phone numbers in my brain, like maybe I would have if 50 years ago, versus, using that, if I have limited bandwidth here to hold stuff, what would be more valuable to have, 100 phone numbers or some actual thing that I could perhaps use given, if think of my brain as a hard drive and I only have so many
Tony,
bits
that's
of
fixed
information I can
mindset
hold.
thinking. The idea that the mind can only hold a certain amount of information. I mean, our brains are ultra powerful. We could do so much with them. No, I agree with you in concept that offloading grunt work to a machine is okay. My aspect of what we've done though by pushing so much of the memory, I guess you would say, into a machine is we no longer have the ability to access it quickly and come up with solutions. So now we have to interface with that machine, which then changes our skill set internally. So it's not so much that I have a problem with the machine taking over some of that role. I have a problem with what it means that we no longer have that kind of base memory to work with in our own minds.
So if I'm speaking computer language here, I'm hearing is that it's like we increased the size of our hard drive, like our main hard drive, but we decreased the size of our RAM, like our quick access and ability to use that.
Well, the idea is we want to use the RAM for something else. But again, you're assuming that there's a limited amount of RAM, and I don't necessarily assume that, because there's ways for us to think better and think more. I don't know if more is the right term. Think better, which of course is how to think better. So
How to think better. That's the whole idea. Exactly. Yeah, that's interesting though. I mean, now it got me thinking, Tony, when you say that, is like how much memory can we store? And I don't think the human brain stores it like on a hard drive. It stores it more of pictures and ideas and how does our recall work? It's not the same thing. And I watched a couple of videos on large language models and how they get trained and everything, and they literally have like billions and billions and billions of little knobs that adjust, like here's an input and then here's the output, and they use a training data and they say, yeah, you got that right, good boy, and then you didn't get it right, so like no, we need keep learning or something like that. So yeah, I don't even understand, but I know if I can get to understand it better in my mind, I'll be able to better use the tool because I have an idea of the what do you call it, the boundaries around this tool.
Well, I think
I haven't found any boundaries.
One of the things I've noticed, and again, kind of why I even stopped keeping up with all the latest updates. Because if
Yeah.
you look back, even again from, I think big the big thing that got AI's attention was when Chat GPT came out. It was the third version of it, right? Because it's been a while for a while, but when it kind of became mainstream was the third
Yeah.
version of it. And if you could go back and compare that model to the one we have today, it's like almost night and day difference. And
Yeah.
that was just what, maybe 2 years ago? Not
Yeah.
even at this point. So
So much of the capability is growing every week, like you said. One of the things, I used to go to different apps to generate pictures or to generate graphics.
Hmm.
And then, Dolly wasn't that good at the time through chat, and it's gotten so much better. Actually, it's gotten worse recently because I think so many people are using it, but it got a lot better in its capabilities to the point where I don't even use a third party graphic generator as much anymore unless it's a very specialized need. Because I can just do it through chat. Chat's doing so much of the stuff that one-off AI tools were doing for a long time.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's kind of where I was going with it, is that I think we're going to get to a point where these sort of limitations don't exist anymore because the technology problems are being solved by the technology itself. And so that's what
Yeah.
makes this such a big exponential curve. It's like most of the
Hmm.
programming now, like it used to be a big thing, like learn how to code, learn how to code. Now, like most of these models know how to code better than any human do. So
I'm
it's
vibe coding an app right now, and I just, I'm not using the paid version. I'm using the free version, and it limits every day. So I go in for about 20 minutes every day, and I talk to it and say, no, this doesn't work, or change that, or this was, and it finds an error and it fixes the error itself. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that actually, it's 80% of it works 80% right now, and I've only interacted with it for 2 days. If I were to spend some money and spend a couple hours on this, I'd probably come up with something that's a
Hmm.
lot more rock solid.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Um, I know for me, I think the skill that I need to develop is, of course, you learn the technology, but it's how do you speak to it? How do you talk to it? How do
Mhm.
you be very, very clear what you want? You can just go in and type in, "Hey, write me a report about birds." I mean, you'll get something, right? But if you just copy and paste it and turn it as your homework, I mean, that's how you get dumber. Like you
Well,
can
Scott, I
actually, right? You can still use AI and get smarter as long as you interactively.
Well, it's not just interactively. You need to think through what you want it to do. So you still have to provide it logic to do the grunt work. So I mean, like when I'm prompting it, it's my prompts are 3 minutes, 4 minutes of verbal text. So
Hmm.
that translates to like a couple pages per prompt.
Hmm.
And so I go and I give it my ideas, my information, what I'm looking for, the nuance to what I'm looking for, some examples where it might get some information to compare it to, so that the output I get is something like, yeah, that's pretty good. Now let's
Yeah.
iterate on that.
Yeah, yeah. Prompting is a skill, and one thing I've been doing, Chris, is so I'll type in my prompt, and then I'll read it, and then I'll ask it, okay, now, what do you think the prompt is, right? What do you think I'm trying to mean? And it'll like come back with something, and it'll typically be not so it'll have words, but then it'll be very bullet pointed things as well too, which I think is probably the preferred method that it wants to be prompted. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get it actually to write my prompts for me now.
Well, and if you're trying to get it to do multiple steps, you can have it do multiple steps and not have to come back every time to you. But you got to be very clear what it's supposed to be
Yes,
doing.
right.
You
Yeah.
get the output, take that output, go do this, and then take
Yes.
that output and go do this. And it
Yeah.
can do steps in a single prompt, and
Yes.
that'll shortcut your interaction time with it. But that
Yeah.
means a more complex prompt in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
and it also means more layers though that it does need to think through. So then you also get to be sure that what you're giving it, that it's not going to miss one of those steps. So that's the thing I've noticed, is that if I try to give it a lot at once, then there could be something in between the step A through D that was missed, where I would catch it if I just gave it, okay, let's do step one,
Yeah.
work through this, then go on to the next one and the next one. So I think it really depends on the complexity of what you're trying to do and your knowledge and experience of it as well, to see what's a good output versus what's not.
Well, yeah,
We,
you still got to think in systems. You still got to explain the process to it. It
we've,
just, yeah.
because Scott, you and I have talked about how different we think, and I love giving it exceedingly long prompts, And I've
Okay.
gotten to the point where the outcome I get is almost always what I want, and I'm confident in what I get out.
Okay. Well, that's good then. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there's some way I'm presenting information that does what Tony says in there, and it's giving it the logic. So I don't need to check it every step. It's somehow I'm providing enough guidance that it's able to check it.
Yeah, and
I don't
so
know,
I don't
man.
know if your prompts are optimal or not. I mean, step one is just getting it to do what you want it to do. That's step one. And then step two is now how can I just cut out all the filler words and
Well,
just
step
put
two
in
is how do I
just the words that
monetize
you want.
that, which is something you care. Well, I should care about more is what I should do. But
Yeah, yeah. And that's what I'm learning. And then the problem is if you put, a lot of these things, because every certain word goes into like approximately 1.3 tokens, right? A token is just a little tiny chunk of thing. So the idea, as soon as you get it to do what you want, then you're like, okay, now how can I simplify and use the minimum number of tokens possible to still get what I want reliably? And what that does is save space, it saves computing time. So now you're optimizing your message, just like in Toastmasters, right? The whole idea, the hardest part for me in giving a speech or something is I can babble for hours, but it's like, how can I cut it down into 5 to 7 minutes of a very succinct message that most people in the audience will be like, oh yeah, I understand what you're talking about. I got that.
so Scott, how long do you think it's going to be valuable to try to minimize the number of tokens?
How long
And
is it going
the
to be?
reason why I'm saying that, there was a time when people who wrote code were very proud of being able to write very precise code without extra stuff in it. And then the memory of the computers, the computing power of the computers all got better, and the code got a lot sloppier. It got more complex too, but it got a lot
Yeah,
sloppier as
got to
well.
complex. Yeah, because
So
you
I'm
got to
wondering,
be
I
precise.
kind of see tokens as that, is like eventually the cost of tokens is so cheap that you can be as sloppy as you want in your prompts.
Yeah, I guess, but it's still not as efficient though. So I guess it
It
depends on
isn't,
how
but
fast it is. It
yeah,
may not be critical, right?
yeah.
I mean, you could be driving a car and okay, this is a wind's blowing 5 miles an hour. You drive it into it. It's like, yeah, who cares, right? I mean, it doesn't really.
Well, if you're doing
Doesn't
millions of
really matter.
transactions a day, then saving 0.00001 cent or whatever on a transaction might actually add up. But
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's
I
why,
don't
Scott,
know.
you're an engineer because you're always thinking in terms of efficiency, and so you're great for the to optimize for that. But what I'm hearing Chris say is, there's there's only so much value in optimizing certain things before it's just a moot point, not worth it.
Well, yeah, but do you guys remember? Have you guys ever programmed anything significantly system-wise or anything? Tony, you
not in a
program?
long time.
It's been a long
Hello.
time, yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that we would do is this was like 20 years ago, is we would do something called profiling the code, right? Where basically what you do is you would see how much time the processor spent executing each chunk of the code. And so there might be an input routine or some checking or something like that, it was a big chunk of code and you're like, oh my God, we could probably make this thing 5 times as fast. But I'm like, don't, right? It doesn't matter because 90% of the runtime is in this little chunk of code. So this is where you want to optimize, not that other part.
Well, that's like the systems thinking, right? Optimizing one piece of a system isn't going to help when it becomes the bottleneck for everything else.
Yeah. So ideally, you're always hunting for bottlenecks, right?
Yeah, so what you do is you're always looking to optimize as much the system as a whole, not just one piece of a system as a whole. And
Yeah.
that's the problem is everyone says, "Oh, I can optimize this thing here." Well, great, you can make it 50 times better, but if the rest of the system can't handle that load, then it doesn't matter if it's 50 times better.
Yeah. Because should you? It doesn't
Yeah.
matter, right? I mean, you're not going to get any gain. I mean, this is like project management 101, right? This is a critical path, which says, my gosh, for every day that this slips, this date, the whole project date
So
slips.
everyone gets it at a project management level, but when you start going to the program level or you start going to the entire environment and you see how larger systems fit together,
Yeah.
because I mean, project management is seeing how a small system, how the pieces in a small system fits together, right? And those pieces could be systems of themselves. But when you blow that up bigger and bigger, and it's like you have departments now who have their own efficiency teams and their own project managers, then actually being able to assess the bigger system and understanding what it can and can't do. I mean, that's a higher level of thinking. And
Well, but
usually when you're the longer you're in a field, the more you're able to do that.
Yeah, well, but this is just abstraction. You gotta put layers of abstractions on time so that it simplifies it. So everything's a black box. It's like, okay, this comes in and then some range of output comes out. We know, right? Because that's going to be piped into the input of something else. So we know that unless you unit test and check to make sure that those parameters are within range, the thing could break.
I understand what you're saying. I'm not quite tying it to what I was saying though.
It doesn't really matter, actually. Mine's
Okay.
better than yours anyways. Yeah, so
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
I was
You
I
know,
was explaining to Chris, I'm abstracting. I'm trying to explain how you can still develop very complicated systems, but do it in a way that you can sort of take data in bigger chunks. It's called abstraction, right? Just
So
like the
I
money
think
guy we were talking
I think
about.
the concern is when you get into real systems thinking, systems interact with each other and they change the outcome as they interact. It's not about inputs and outputs of each individual piece. It's about how an input and an output of one part of a system, one mini system, you would say, actually impacts every other system it interacts with. So then the inputs and outputs of every other system get impacted by the inputs and outputs of one system. That's systems thinking. So basically, everything changes when one thing changes. And understanding how that works is what I'm talking about when I talk about systems thinking.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the same thing. So you're talking about a bunch of black boxes connected together, right?
They're not black
And
boxes is the problem. See, going to the black box is you're stripping away the complexity of how they interact,
yes, of
which is
course, that's
fine.
what I'm
Which is
trying to do.
fine from a let me solve this one immediate problem. It's not
Mm,
fine when I've got what are the downstream impacts of optimizing for one thing. So if I know the inputs and outputs of each part of a tire manufacturing company, and I've
yes.
got one piece of it here where I can increase the output by 4 times by making changes to it and updating the software and hiring new people. Well, that's great. But if the rest of the system can't handle that, then I end up with a backload of material here that gets stuck at the next step in the process. And now I've got to store that material here. And when you store it, then I have to get a contract to store it off-site. And suddenly the complexity of the system changes. That's what I'm saying. It's not inputs and outputs only, because how they interact, it changes the requirements of what's happening. So that's why systems thinking in and of itself is really a much more complex thing than just seeing how pieces fit together.
No, that's why you got to abstract out to make it possible to think like that. And then
I
the
don't think
whole
it's
thing
possible
working
to think
together.
like that. No, that's the thing. Well, I take that back. Some level of abstraction, but it's not. You can't simplify it to just an input and an output. I think at
Yes, you
that
can.
point,
Of course
I
you
don't think
can.
you
This is
can.
this is the
yeah,
whole
what
thing. Yeah, we've been doing this for 20 years. This is the concept of
Yeah, and
object-oriented
look how
programming.
broken the systems are today.
Well, the systems are not broken. We're doing things now that we've never been able to do. So the systems are
Sure,
not broken. I mean,
sure. But
do you know how
so
complicated it is just to pick up a phone and dial and have somebody else get called? You know how much complexity there is in that? But we've abstracted it out to make it simple so it's usable and it's predictable.
I
yeah,
think
I
the
think
abstraction loses the connection.
ultimately what I'm hearing is that it's in the inputs that when you're it's like drilling in and zooming out at the same time, because everything is interconnected, and I think that's where some of like the bigger problems we have will actually be solved by AI, because I think for us, I think we are capped to a certain extent on some of the complexity of how systems do interact with each other. So thinking of really big problems that we have not been able to solve as as a society, as humanity, that put enough resources together to be able to see it all at the same time, which I think there is a limitation in our organic matter in our minds to be able to do that. I think that's where these artificial intelligence will be able to do that at some point. And I
Well,
think
this is
already
what
starting
you
to
use
happen now.
tools for, right? That's why we develop tools.
But
That's why.
okay, so Scott, one of the things is we know that as humans, we try to avoid pain and we try to chase after pleasure, and so we've built systems that allow us to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. At what expense has that
Oh,
happened? Yeah,
no, that's maybe
sorry.
that's some system, but when you say systems, you're referring to all. Do you mean all systems? Because that's what you just said.
I'm implying all systems, but I don't mean all systems.
Okay, well then don't say all systems when you don't
I
mean
didn't
all
say all
systems.
systems. I implied all systems. I
Okay, you
didn't
implied
say
it. So
all
I think
systems.
what you need to do, Chris, this is prompting. Say what you mean precisely. Boom.
So what comes to my mind is something along the lines of the quality of people graduating from school and what they learn, when it comes to people being dopamine addicts on social media and what
Yes.
impact that has. These are all secondary, third order effects from things that we've built. And we've optimized for things. We've built algorithms to get the clicks, to get the attention. We've
Of
built
course.
algorithms to make the money, right? So we've optimized that. And what has been the output? The output has been easy access, avoidance of things we don't want to see, things we don't want to hear, and it is made for a certain mindset of the people in there. So that is a complexity of the system that I don't think is included in the abstract idea of let's optimize this algorithm to get clicks.
Well, it depends on what you're trying to achieve, right? So Mark Zuckerberg, when he invented Facebook,
I'm not talking about abstracting and just saying, I just want this. You're talking about when you do abstracting, you have to strip stuff out and you get to, okay, this is my goal. So I'm going to abstract down to this goal. And I'm saying that's the problem. Systems aren't just one thing. They're multiple things in how they interact. So when you abstract, you lose that systems thinking that I'm talking about, which is the complexity. You're solving for a problem. I'm trying to keep the entire thing. Oh, I'm trying to keep awareness of the entirety of what's going on.
well, yeah, me too, right? But you have to understand the essence of this thing, what it does and when it does it and when it won't do it. And then at an individual level, right? That's the first step. If you don't do that, you can never abstract away. Then you have to start to put two things together and see what happens. And then three things and four things and five things. And this is where your second and third and fourth order consequences will start to have. But that's a different level because that's understanding how these things interact together and
That's
the
systems
complexity starts to
thinking. That's
build.
the whole idea of systems thinking.
Well, that's what I'm defining it is actually, but you didn't define it properly.
I didn't define what properly. How is that defined
Systems
differently?
thinking.
It's how systems interact. Yes, that's it.
Yeah, but you said that it doesn't. You don't have to go down to the individual level. You do have to. Otherwise, you can never predict what the system's going to do.
You don't have to go down to the individual what? I'm sorry.
To the little black box. The little black box, right? You got to go down to that level to truly start to understand and build up, abstract layer upon layer so you can understand how this thing's going to work.
But Scott, at some point you don't go. The little black box doesn't exist. Could
Yes,
you just
it
go?
does, Chris.
Because every
It
little
exists.
black box is made of systems, and and then within that, every one of those systems is a little black box, and each one of those is made up of systems. And
Yes,
you can take
correct.
systems down to the molecular atomic level.
It's called physics. Yes, that's where we start. Exactly.
That's where you're starting when you make a social media page or
No,
an
if you want to make
algorithm.
an airplane fly, you got to start with physics, right? This is first principle thinking. This is like 101 thinking that I've been doing for most of my life.
Yeah, I don't think that's what we're talking about here. I really don't.
Well,
Because what I'm talking
wait,
about.
wait, stop. Speak precisely what we're talking about or what you're talking about, because that's different.
Well, obviously, if you and I are not talking about the same thing, then there's a communications problem here.
That's correct, actually. So this is
Right?
what I need you to do.
I agree.
You need to
I
speak
hear one thing over here and
precisely,
another
Chris.
thing over here.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tony, what do you hear as the differentiation here?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's clearly a context that's missing in what like there's a lot of in the communication of what both of you are speaking into. There's a lot of this or that, and so we're not clear on the definitions of certain things
Right.
because we're
Exactly.
talking about abstract concepts. And so I think then in that now we're saying, well, when we do this or we do that, but that's open to interpretation.
Well, it is, and Chris, you are sloppy. I mean, you are not precise in your words, and because I've caught you probably 100 times
You
on this.
see,
Let me
that's an ad
finish.
hominem attack. He's attacking me as opposed to my argument.
No, I'm not. I'm talking. I'm saying you're not speaking precisely, but it just happened 5 minutes ago when I asked the question. Are you talking about we or you? And you're like, well, I implied this, but I said that. So yeah, that's an imprecise statement. And then that leads me down another road. So if you would just stop, pause, and think clearly and choose your words carefully.
You did what you're supposed to do in that situation. You asked,
I did.
right? Isn't that what you're supposed to do
I
when you're?
did. I did ask, right? Didn't I
Yes.
ask multiple times already?
Yes. And I clarified with you. And once I clarified with you, we should be moving on to the next thing.
Well,
I don't know
because
why
it's a
you harp
pattern.
on this idea. We clarified
Because
it.
it's a pattern, Chris. It's over and over and over and over again. And it slows progress down significantly.
Part of the issue here is I'm able to think in abstracts without getting into the specifics.
Yeah, but then you're wrong. And you lead other people wrong. You're like a little black box that messes up the other black boxes. So
How
what
is that a
has to
little
happen
black box?
is we need to
What is a
control
little
the
black box?
constraints.
What is a little black box?
A little black box is something that takes some sort of stimulus in, some sort of information, and then processes it internally that we don't care what happens internally, and then it spits something out. So it's got an input and an output.
So
And what we
I
need to
think
do,
your definition I have an inherent problem with. We
okay,
don't
well,
care
that's
what
good.
happens. We don't care what happens internally, is what you said, and I think that's where it breaks down. Because if you don't care what happens internally, then understanding how it impacts how that system operates and how its operation can impact other systems around it, other little black boxes around it. Right? That's what I'm talking about. When you don't care about how it operates, you have an in and an out, and that's all you're thinking of, then you're missing the complexity of how it operates and how it interacts with what's
Chris,
around it.
that's the abstraction I've been talking about. That's the
And that's
abstraction.
why I don't like the
actually.
abstraction.
Well,
Exactly.
but it's how it's done, Chris. It's like this is how software has been done. This is how systems are built since the beginning of time.
And this is why systems thinking is something that's come about. The idea that when you get different systems that have different goals and different criteria, different constraints, whatever you want to put around them, that they operate that operate and they don't have a common language at a common level of maybe the level of abstraction, maybe we'll call it that, at a common level of abstraction, then you end up not being able to really understand how a system works. And the system could be at any level. It could be at the universal level, or it could be at the molecular level. The idea being that you need to understand how the pieces within it work to understand how the system changes as pieces.
You can do that if it's extremely simple systems. When it becomes very complex, you cannot do that. Because you cannot
have to do that. That's how you solve big problems. And by big problems, I mean global warming. I mean, nuclear pollution. I don't know what anything else out there that's going to be something that is a problem from a societal standpoint. That is not something you solve by making little black boxes. You've got to understand how the bigger.
That's how it's done. And it's been done for 30 years, and it's going to be forever doing that, Chris. It's like then you haven't worked in environments.
No, it's something that's actually it's something I think that it has to change, and AI can change that, because AI is going to be able to understand those complexities and keep them on board and say, okay, this is how this little system down here works. Right? And maybe it can think of it in two ways. It can think of it as a black box for the purpose of solving a particular problem, but at the same time, it can think of it as what it actually does, how that actually that little black box system works, so that it's able then to say, oh, but if we change this, that has an impact over here.
Those are done with different groups of people, Chris. So you have theoretical physicists that understand, and then you have physics.
So now you're saying two different groups of people do two different types of thinking.
No, it's the same thinking. It's what they understand. They know how this thing works.
Mm-hmm.
And you being high level, like for instance, if you're making a phone call, you don't have to understand the incredible complexity underneath. It's abstracted out into an interface that you can dial and you can talk. Because it would be impossible for you to understand everything that's going on beneath the hood. And you don't have to.
Yeah,
that's why we create abstractions.
So why are you bringing the phone call into this?
It's an analogy to talk about system. Because this phone is part of a very large system.
Sure.
Yeah, but I think what Chris is saying right now, Scott, is everything is part of a large system. And so what he's talking about is how everything interrelates to each other, and that there's a complexity there that is not as simple as the input output.
No, it's not as simple. But I'm saying if you want to have a high level view of a system, actually, no one person is going to know every tiny detail. You have groups of people that are really good at this, and what they do is they build this little black box. I'm just telling you, this is how I think about it, and how everybody I've worked with thinks about it, except for Chris. And then you tightly control through specs. You say, look, this is the allowable inputs to this box, and then this is what the box is going to output.
Well, what I'm hearing Chris say is actually that right there, the fact that the way it's been is that we have this group of people that does this and this group of people that does that, is that they're not actually interconnected at a deeper level, where if we get to one intelligence that actually understands it all, and that it's not a different group of people, because when you can see every single thing at once, then you're able to solve much more complicated problems because you can see the different distinctions.
Yeah, that's called God. That's what God's job is.
And some
Right?
could
He
argue
made
that's
it
what we're
all.
creating. Some
Right.
some have argued that's what we're creating right now,
He
and that's a
made it
whole
all,
different
right?
level.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
and I think
So Scott,
that's a conversation worth looking at, is where you really go down the rabbit hole of artificial intelligence and you think about that, right? Because it's like you look at we're at a point right now where there's already more machines than there are people, right?
Okay,
And
yeah.
so, and the more we do that, the more essentially the more processing power we have. And
Mm-hmm.
now we have this other thing of inputs, right? So there's cameras literally everywhere. There's more
Everywhere.
eyes than there are, people. Again, so
Yeah,
we
right, right.
we look at all the inputs that are coming in, and what's the rate of that? It's only growing. It's probably going to continue to grow at
Yeah.
a more and more rate. So now we take the intelligence of these machines that can literally see everything, can hear everything, has all the inputs, has all the knowledge, has all the information. It kind of sounds very similar to this thing people call God, all seeing, all knowing. And you look at that and you're like, well, that's a really interesting thing of what we're creating, something that can see everything, can know everything, has all the data, has all the information, probably knows more about me than many other people, just because of all the data it has. No, and that rate of data extraction is getting larger and larger because we're relying on it more and more. And so we're getting to a point where, again, now it's just a processing power thing, which I think that will be solved rather quickly, to then be able to instantaneously see all this data simultaneously, use that to really look at holistically what's going on. And I think that's what Chris is really speaking into right now. And that's where I've gone to, where I'm like, some of the problems I used to think about, I'm like, you know what? I don't even need to worry about that anymore because I see AI solving that. I don't know how it's going to do it, but I could see how, because the level of intelligence actually solves problems. Like so many of the problems we have is just an IQ problem. Like when you
Yeah.
add more IQ points, like things, oh wow, I didn't think of this. I didn't have that, creativity. And so it's like not creativity, that's probably not the right word, but it's putting these pieces together in such a way that now we have bigger systems, and that's what I think Chris is speaking on, and that's a really fascinating conversation to
Oh, is
start
that what
thinking
you're
about
speaking
that.
on, Chris? Be precise in what you're think, and then clearly articulate what's in your brain.
what is confusing about what I said, Scott?
Well,
Basically,
everything.
so
Chris.
let me say it this way. So you got something you want to solve for, whatever
Yeah.
it is, something you want to build.
Give an example. Let's give a hard
And
example.
no, it doesn't matter what it is.
Yes, it
That's
does.
no, this is now I don't need an example. Let's pull it out of this and let's talk about, you want to build something. I don't care what you're building, right? But you say, okay, it's made up of a bunch of pieces,
Yeah.
and these pieces themselves, in order to be able to more efficiently, more simply use them, let's turn them into little black boxes, inputs, outputs.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple that way. And now I can
Right.
plug them all together in line and whatever flow. And now the output of all this is whatever this product or solution it needs to
Right.
be. Right. And I'm like, okay, I get that. You're solving for that thing. Right. But the
What is
problem
that
with, oh,
thing? Wait,
it
what is
doesn't
that
matter
thing?
what that thing is.
Well, you can't just say that thing and then say it doesn't matter with it, because now I'm not
Scott,
following
it
you.
doesn't
So
matter. Pick any damn thing you want. I don't
you
care.
pick it, Chris. You're the one with the example. Give an example.
I don't care.
See, this is the
I'll,
this
I'll
is
pick one. How
Yeah.
about we pick cancer?
cancer. Okay, fine.
Okay. So you're solving for cancer, right? And you've got all these tools, all these processes, all these
Mm-hmm.
things that you can use to make the solution. And I assume it's going to be one particular kind of cancer, unless you can solve for all cancer. But so you say, okay, we've got radiology, we've got medicine, we've got treatments, we've got exercise, we've got diet, we've got all these things, and
Yeah.
now we're going to simplify down to a input output. This diet solves this piece, helps to solve this cancer, and this
Yeah.
medicine helps to solve this cancer. And by
Yeah.
putting them all together in a particular flow, we're going to get rid of that cancer. And you're going, great, that's wonderful. And then someone goes, oh, by the way, that medicine causes you to go sterile. Or that
Yeah.
medicine also does this other stuff. So this is a second order thing that isn't part of the cure to cancer because that's focused on one thing. So what ends up happening is you see that the complexity of the little black box systems you've put together, actually there's more to it than just the little black box you've talked about. And how it interacts or how it affects the outcome is going to be different. So you might be able to say, I solved this, this square over here, this cancer thing,
That
but
problem.
it's a problem in a bigger set. And that's where I think systems thinking allows you to consider that ahead of time. How will giving someone a medicine that gives them a different disease solve our problem or not solve our problem? And then you go, oh, well, that actually changes the other types of care we need to give it. No longer can you do the same exercise because this is happening, or no longer can we, whatever the impact is, it's because when you abstract it down to a little black box, you're missing a lot of the other complexities of how it could impact this other systems.
Well, by definition, that's called abstraction. Yeah, you're missing. So what you do is you create
So,
a black
Scott,
box.
you're defending abstraction because it's abstraction. You brought up abstraction. I
Yeah,
didn't bring up
exactly.
abstraction.
Yeah.
So you're defending abstraction as the answer because it's abstraction, and that's how you need to simplify it to
Well,
do
but
it.
you
And
didn't
I'm
let me
saying
finish.
that's why it's hard.
Okay, but you interrupted me. You didn't let me finish my sentence,
You've
actually.
interrupted me many times, but go ahead.
So what I'm saying then is you what you do is you view the human being as a black box, right? And then they've got a problem in that black box. So you put an input in, and it's like, yeah, I killed the cancer, but yes, the black box doesn't work anymore. So that's not a good solution. So now you got to figure out, now you got to go inside that black box and understand what happened.
Okay, why can't we just do that from the start?
That is called systems thinking. I mean, we can do it from the start. But you have to define the black box, you have to define the constraints around it, and you have to define what goes in and what goes out. So you understand the essence of that black box. Because if you don't do that, then you can never have a chance of understanding how the system will work together.
I disagree with that last statement. Up to that last statement, I was okay with it. What?
Okay,
So
then you got to tell me where I'm wrong, because this is systems thinking and developing software that's been happening for 50 years.
I think the difficulty with systems thinking is when you've got different systems with different goals actually makes it even harder, or different methods of interacting. And what ends up happening is they're not all following the same, for lack of a better term, laws of physics.
Our
So
protocol, right?
Department A versus Department B versus Department C all operate differently, right? They're not using the same operating whatever, and
Well, that's
therefore
not physics,
they
Chris. That's not
wait.
physics.
That's not physics. That's what I'm saying.
You said they're not following the laws of physics. They
The
have
way
to.
something operates, its operating system,
Yeah.
regardless of how you build it up and why it works that way, that is the way that organization, that system works. Now you could say it shouldn't work that way. It needs to work a different way. That you can argue that all you want, but as soon as you bring people into the equation, it's going to operate the way it grows culturally, or whoever's in charge authoritatively, or whatever. And
No,
so
this
when you
is-
have,
This is what I'm breaking down. You said that's the laws of physics. That is not the laws of physics.
I'm saying in that department, that is the
Yeah.
equivalent of their laws of physics. Their laws of physics.
Okay,
It's the
so
way
you're
they
defining
operate.
physics then.
It's
Okay.
the way they operate.
Okay, that's
The way the
that's
world
different than
works,
laws
the
of
way
physics.
the way the world works is physics. The way the department works, its operating system, is their physics. That's what I'm getting at.
The way I think about this, and this is where we can get into a topic I am really passionate about.
Yeah.
It's like how these things work is like they're interdisciplinary, right? So a big problem, like a goal that I would love to see happen in my lifetime, is like this problem we have with homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
And because it is so multidisciplinary, right? It's not a real estate problem. It's not a government problem. It's not a financial literacy problem. It's not a psychological problem. It's not a drug problem. It's literally all of them.
All
And
of
they're
them,
all
right?
happening
Exactly.
simultaneously
Yes.
in so many different disciplines that you're like, okay, let's fix this thing over here. But then there's and so to actually get to the root of it, it's like, where is it? It's all over the place.
Well,
That's a
that
good
process is
example.
called root
That's a
cause
very good example.
analysis.
No, that
Yeah, that's root cause analysis. So you can dig down and find out what is the cause or the causes, like you were talking about, right?
that's yeah. I think the idea of a root cause is problematic in so much of what we do today. We want the simple answer. And so we go to a root cause analysis as opposed to causes, right? Everything is more complex than we want it to be. And I think if we
Yes.
assume, yeah, there's an element of drug abuse, there's an element of mental illness, there's an element of economic hardship, there's an element of all those things in there, and how they interact. In one person, it may be all mental health. In another person, it may all be
Yeah.
drugs. In others, it
Yeah.
might be a combination of any of these things. And so coming up with
Assuming
one sweeping answer is not the way it's going to work.
no, of
So
course not.
you end up having all these different systems that they can't work on their own. They've got to interact. And as soon as you start putting effort into one, it changes how the other ones operate. If you
Yes.
got
Yeah.
rid of if you threw a lot of money at housing, which we've done,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
technically that should get rid of a lot of the problem. But what did that do to all the other systems? What happened as soon as these people had places to live? What happened to the other systems? Or as soon as you got a bunch of people off of drugs, what happened to the other systems? They all interact. It isn't just an input output for each of those systems, it's an input output and how the other systems changed. And when those systems change, how does it change the original system we're talking about?
Yeah, so that is the process called root cause analysis. What you go down is you go down and you keep drilling down, you keep drilling down, you keep drilling down till you understand what is the cause or causes of the problem.
Yeah.
That's
So
a process that's a mental
I
model.
get that, and I would have argued that way 20 years ago, 10 years ago,
Yeah.
maybe even
Yeah.
5 years ago. I don't think it's as clear as you think it is, or as I used to think it was. And I think the reason why is because root cause analysis uh, assumes a certain this, then this, then this, then this flow that you can work backward and find the beginning of. And I
Yeah.
think what ends up happening is this happens. Let me get in front of the camera. This happens here. That happens here. While that happens, it goes back and changes this first thing, and then that changes the thing, and then that changes over here, and you get an eternal loop of changes that occur because they're feeding into each other, and that makes it extremely hard, not impossible, but extremely hard to do the root cause analysis that you're talking about.
Extremely difficult. Yeah, exactly right. Because what's happening is you're not understanding the mechanism underneath. So you haven't drilled down deep enough.
And so I think we're getting to a point where I would say it's almost impossible with the current level of thinking we have, hence the AI conversation, to be able to extrapolate down to that level or to drill down into that level. And so the way systems thinking works today is you try to do a top 10% thinking level to try to get some of those interactions. Because even if you just get the first 10% of thoughts as far as how these things interact, you're already going layers deeper than the engineering solutions we've done in the past. That's where I think we're talking about. And so that's why
that's why it always goes back to physics. No matter what, it's physics, right? You gotta dig down into physics.
So let's
That's
go
where it
into
comes.
physics with this homelessness problem. I'd love to hear your
Okay,
breakdown of that, Scott.
perfect. Okay, so let's
So
go into
okay.
physics. So typically, what happens is first of all, there's physics, and then on the top of physics, it's biology, right? So this is a biology problem. It's the way the biology system integrates and responds to external stimulus. And so in this particular case, typically let's start at probably a simple thing. Let's start at the simple black box, which would be a single cell. And the cell has inputs and the cell has outputs. Now inside that black box of the cell, it gets really complicated inside the cell. In fact, I don't think we fully understand why the cell even works, right? Completely. Now we've mapped the DNA, we understand certain things about the cell, but we can't even explain, our best scientists today, what's the difference between something that's living and what's not living. They can't even give a clear definition of that. And so until we can start to dig down at that level, the hope of fixing this problem is slim to none, you know? I mean, we can put band-aids, we can go after symptoms, right? We can start to see, well, we got trends that, okay, this person is this, maybe they were mistreated, maybe they got a mental thing, maybe they didn't have the right software going in, maybe they got molested, that somehow messed up their brain. I mean, there's possible causes to that, and maybe we can start to head off some of those, but we're never definitively solve the problem because the system is too complicated to understand.
Let me go back to something you said a moment ago, and I don't know the veracity of it, that science has a hard time distinguishing between things that are alive and dead.
Yeah.
Where's that from? I don't. That's you're making a statement there that I'm questioning, because I don't have that viewpoint.
Oh, I see. Okay, so my statement is they don't understand I mean, they understand you can basically say that thing's alive and that thing's dead, right? But let's take something in the middle, like a virus. And most scientists be like, well, I mean, it kind of acts like a living thing, but it's really not living. It maybe has certain, RNA of a living thing, but is it just code? I mean, can it reproduce? Okay. I mean, it gets wonky down there, right?
I can take virus as an example. Let me ask you, does the exception of a virus, let's say there's a bunch of things that are hard to distinguish between being alive or dead, does that negate the ability to say things are alive and dead? Not being able to say 100% of cells are alive or dead, and let's say we can only say 90% of cells in the world are alive or dead, does that negate the effectiveness of this conversation? Because can't we just build up from the 90%?
I don't think so, because no, that's the problem, actually. Because I think you got to go right down to the foundation.
So now I think we're having a problem here, because now you're going deep into the weeds of physics, of going back to first principles. I think you need to start from the top and work down to get to first principles. So if we took one of the examples that Tony gave, let's say mental illness.
Yeah.
Right? And then and that kind of goes into the biology aspect of it as well. What causes mental illness? Why is mental illness a problem for people on the streets?
Yes,
when Reagan closed all the asylums and people were put on the streets, we got people who suffer from various mental problems, either because of life experiences, maybe PTSD or other aspects. We have people who do have mental problems because of drugs. We have people who were abused. Yeah. We have people who just have their the 1 in a billion or 1 in a million chance of having a biochemistry that causes imbalances in their minds. All these things, potentially problems, right? Yeah. So, and that is one of the factors that could lead to homelessness.
Yes.
But so now you can go through there, and the thing is, mental illness isn't just homelessness. There's a whole bunch of mental illness that's outside of homelessness.
Yes.
So now are we looking at mental illness as a whole? Are we carving out a piece of mental illness that's related to homelessness, and then we got to figure out the ties into homelessness? It's because it affects your ability to have a job. It affects your ability to interact with people. It affects your ability to all those types of things. Because now we're adding all these other variables in there that really complicate our ability to go to first principles. So if you're saying, mental illness, if we can tie it back to culture, upbringing, health, physical health, genetics, biology. I mean, those are all different pieces of physics that we can drill down into.
Yeah, right. So, yes. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give you a generalized approach to solve a problem, right? So what happens is you have to keep digging down deep enough where you've hit the bottom. They're like, the problem, you got to find where the problem exists in the stack, right? Because you got to say, keep going, because ultimately it's a symptom, and then you got to figure out what the cause. But this cause could be a symptom of something else. So you got to keep drilling down. We were like, the problem is no deeper. We've reached the bottom of the thing. Now at least we know that the problem is at this level, or part of the problem is at the level.
So the problem I see is that you've got a root system under a tree, right? If the tree trunk is the problem,
yes,
and you got the root system going down, basically, it's complex going down, it's complex coming out of the root branching out.
Yes.
Okay, so now I'm going to argue your point that everything needs to be a black box. because at this point it has to be a black box at some point. Otherwise, you do have to go. So this is where you're making a judgment call, hopefully an educated judgment call, to say this is as far as we can go down towards the physics that we can have an impact on. Let's say that we can affect.
That we can understand. Yeah, right.
We might be able to understand deeper, but it may not be something that we have the ability to change meaningfully. People born with birth defects, are we going to fix that? People born mentally ill as opposed to those, are we going to fix that?
We could fix that.
We could do anything, but at some point, money and time, as you always bring up, are issues that are going to get in the way. So, what point do we stop and say this is as far as we're going down this rabbit hole? Now let's go down the other rabbit hole.
That's a judgment call, actually. But I mean, right now, I know that this is a common practice, right? Especially people are doing IVF, is they'll do a DNA test of that particular cell or that zygote that's created, actually, and they can look for markers that, oh, this thing's going to have this disease or that thing, and then you make a decision at that point whether you're going to continue to allow this thing to grow.
So you're going to say we're going to fix homelessness by having people choose the genetic makeup of their child?
Correct.
Okay, well, that's why I got to stop you there, Scott. Because I can go out there right now, and I can guarantee you I can find somebody who, if by the measures of medical diagnosis of mental illness or any of those medical metrics, would be perfectly fine, and they're still homeless.
Yes.
So then that's where the other parts of this equation come in. Well, it's like, okay, so we couldn't just figure it out with the physics part, because how do you explain the person who they don't have any of the health related, whether the mental illness or anything even close to that, and it's purely something else?
Well, I'll defend Scott on this one, and because I kind of have this belief too, is if we had the mental capacity to actually understand every single minuscule piece of a situation, we could predict the outcome, right? We don't have that ability. We'll never have that ability. AI may never have that ability. That truly is a God level kind of conversation.
Yeah, right.
But if you were to take the mental health, the drugs, the education, all those things, and pare it down to you could get down to a physics level on each of those. And physics it's not just the laws of the way the world works. I mean, but you can, it's like if you knew everything about how a person's mind worked and how their biochemistry worked, you could probably predict their life at some level if you actually understood.
Of course, 100%. Yeah,
right.
Of course, the chance of anyone ever being able to do that is almost, to the point of not even considering an option.
Well, I guess what I was referring to, because there's a segment. So homelessness is a really interesting problem, because it's like there's a segment of the homeless population that are like willfully homeless because right. But like in a way where it's like, oh yeah, because I don't want to participate in that system. Essentially, the housing system.
I want freedom. I don't want to have to follow rules. I like not having to I can see economic reasons. I don't want to have a house, because there's different levels of homelessness. The guy who lives in a camper van versus the person who lives on the street. Yeah. We tend to think of the person living on the street, but you see these guys on YouTube living in really nice camper vans. So they're homeless
that was where I was trying to take the conversation, because then if it's like, where does the physics get into that equation?
So again, that's your definition. That's your problem definition. Is that really a homeless person?
Because I mean, you got to define what a homeless person is first of all. But let's go back to the DNA. So there's two things, right? There's the DNA, and some people have a proclivity through their DNA, through their literally code, that they could be I can't even say the word, but they could be influenced by their environment much more deeply than somebody else. Like take like an alcoholic. There's like a gene that will like if you were in a family who's an alcoholic, you'll almost certainly become an alcoholic.
Addictive personalities or whatever we call them, people who are easily addicted.
Yes, exactly. That's in their software, man. That is pre-programmed in from the beginning.
Yeah. And then you've got the people who have that personality or that trait who never do that. So something else got in the way, and that might be upbringing or something else, or strict parenting, or I don't know what that could be. But you end up with the nuances of the things that don't follow the norm, and then being able to build that back into your model.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the cancer is if you get skin cancer, that means you've been out in the sun too long. One of the rays from the sun has came in. Uh-oh, where did Tony go? Tony, come back. And it literally knocked some little DNA thing out of the way, right? It literally was something physical that when this thing was dividing, that you created a little bit of damage to it.
So
And
Scott,
now,
so you're stating again something that you and I think to agree on.
yeah,
If we had a way to understand every variable and go down to the microscopic atomic building blocks
yes,
and
yes,
work up from there, we would
yeah,
have we would have a very we would have the ability, or actually, someday someone might have the ability to figure out the exact outcome of how we got to where we are today, or how we're
yes,
going to get to
correct.
where we are tomorrow.
Yes,
There's the problem with that, of course, is there's just no way that we can, with our current comprehension, get to that level of
we're not
of,
smart enough, right? We're not smart enough.
understanding. And AI will get a long way there. I don't know if it ever will get all the way there, because again, I think you are talking about a level of complexity that is beyond.
Yeah, we're
maybe
talking
even
God
beyond.
level
Well,
complexity,
let's say
right?
it's probably beyond physics. The level
Oh,
of intelligence
absolutely,
you
of course.
need to do this is beyond physics, which means it's beyond AI, because AI is all physics
Of
too, right?
course. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, literally, God stands outside of space and time and literally created all of that.
So I guess what I'm getting at when I talk about systems thinking is, or the more kind of evolved systems thinking that I'm talking about today, is that you took whatever level of systems thinking you had to solve problems in the past.
Yes,
Engineering
right.
problems, project problems, process problems, right? And what we ended up with, we always ended up with secondary and third order consequences that weren't
Yes.
considered. Oh my gosh, we did this and that happened,
Always, right.
Yeah. Doctors said smoking was good. We find out it was bad now, and we're like a lot of
Yes.
sick people. Or doctors were giving pain meds, and suddenly we got a bunch of people dying from opioids.
Of
Whatever
course, yeah.
that is. So the intent is never the second and third order consequences. The only reason we care about the second and third order is usually because they're bad. If they're good, we don't even talk about them.
Yeah, I
But
mean, almost
what ends up happening is you go back to the original system that you built, and you realize, oh, here's the flaws in that. Now that I'm considering the second order and third order consequences.
Yes, right, exactly.
So I think what's happened is we live in a world where the systems are more complex.
Yes.
The problems we're solving are what we call wicked problems. Solving what for one thing causes other problems. I mean,
Yes.
I solve this problem. What happens when I solve this problem? If I
Yes,
solve
right.
the drug problem in homelessness, what does that cause for the rest of homelessness? I don't know. Is it
Yeah.
going to fix anything, or is it going to push the problem somewhere
Well,
else?
it
I don't know.
just explains the housing supply issue, right? So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
oh,
exactly.
well, we have all these people that didn't want housing, but now they can't.
Everyone wants to live in a house now, and now it's even worse. So the housing costs went up. Housing costs went up, so people are homeless. People are homeless. No,
Yeah.
but the
Yeah.
idea is when you start thinking about that kind of higher level, and the problems have gotten bigger, and our understanding of the world is more complex enough that we can do more detailed thinking. Now we have to kind of raise the bar on that systems thinking.
Yeah, and I combine them together, Chris. You can separate them out if you want, but I really combine first principles and thinking systems together. And maybe I could define them, but I tend to use both simultaneously.
I think very few people really go to first principles. They go to some level of principle below at the base of their system, but first principles, going back to science, I don't think they often do. I think they go back to something like I said, the operating system of a department. They go back to their first principle, which is at the base level how their department operates.
Yeah,
it's not.
right.
Yeah, it doesn't go into why does our department operate this way or anything like
Yes.
that. They don't get
Right.
into that level of thinking.
Yeah, right. I mean, typically for that, I mean, I would say for groups of people in a business working together, I would think culture is probably really important, right? I mean, that's probably the operating system, right? If
I
you
think
said,
that's part of the issue when you talk about homelessness is the culture
Mhm.
of how government looks at homelessness and how not-for-profits look at it and how the health industry looks at it. They all have a different viewpoint. And
Yeah.
if they're all going to be part of the solution, they have to get together and at least understand each other's viewpoint.
Yeah,
If
right.
not, align on a viewpoint would be ideal. But
If you want to
that
solve the problem, right? But who knows to say, but that's assuming that they want to solve the problem.
well, so the example they always give for this is the Paris Accords, right? For going green or whatever, getting rid of greenhouse gases. And the idea was you had businesses showing up as part of this conversation who
Yeah.
were making greenhouse gases as part of
Yeah.
their business, right?
Of course.
And you have them working with people trying to say we need less greenhouse gases. They've got a different viewpoint on this.
Yeah. Right.
So
right.
getting them first to agree, yeah, we probably do need to get rid of greenhouse gases. That's the first challenge you've got in that situation. Then getting them to think about, is it okay for us to spend more money on our operations to cut the cost of greenhouse gases? You've got to get them to be okay with that, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
accept the fact that it's going to cost them something more than the other guys who just say we want to go green. It's going to cost them more, and getting them to agree to that. Like you say, well, the political pressure is going to be there, or the economic pressure is going to be there, or you're going to get bad PR if you don't do this. And suddenly you're like, okay, the ROI is there. Yeah, we're okay to spend a little bit of money for green to stop greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
Right. But that's what we're talking about, is getting that kind of alignment, that kind of systems thinking. Is that isn't something that we can easily put in a black box. We've got to go and kind of address them at the level they're at. And to bring that out. And that's why I think the black box bothered me, is that you said there was an input and an output, and I'm not sure the input and output in a higher level systems thinking is that clear cut.
Well, no, I'm not saying that it's easy to define, but there's always input and output.
There's input and output, but I think when you put it in a black box and you don't see what's in it, then you're not aware of how you can change or impact, or how you might want to change that input output.
Well, here's a question, Chris. Right? Do I understand you may have to go into the black box, right? But I'm not going to go into that black box until I see that the output of that box is affecting negatively other black boxes. I'm like, okay, now I got to go inside that box to see what's going on. But I don't need to understand, as long as the inputs and outputs is good within the constraints, within the specs of the system that we wrote. I don't need, the problem's not there. So I can stop looking. So I don't need to go in that black box and look for anything, because the problem's not there. I need to find where the problem is. Which is root cause analysis. That's the technique.
You sort of convinced me. I've got this idea, though, that if that, it's at what level we're talking about here. If that black box is the system, it's a department and how they work.
Yes,
you've got
right.
an input and output of that department.
Yeah.
The people inside know the quirks that make that system work that way.
Yes.
I think the person in the other department over here, if they just see a black box and they have input and output, then they're going to be negatively impacted, and then we have to figure out how to solve for that.
Yep.
Whereas if from day one the guy in this department could see inside the black box and go, that's going to be a problem for us, then we can.
But most people don't want to do that, Chris. Most people are just, I don't want to do my
that's
job.
why most people aren't good at systems thinking. That's what it comes down to.
And it's always comes down with this, those guys over there, right? Those guys.
Again, but that's why people are bad at systems thinking. That's why it's so hard for us to do.
Well, yeah, I remember when I was in the hospital, like, I don't know, a year and a half ago or something like that. So they stab IVs in you constantly, and it's so freaking annoying. And then so the nurse that was like fixing my IV was bitching about, they did the IV wrong, and they did this, and it shouldn't have been done like this. And I'm like, okay, dude, I got an idea. Why don't you go down and talk to them and tell them if they could change this thing? And he's, no, I can't do that. We can't talk to them. They're not going to listen to me. I mean, it's like, there's the problem. That's a culture problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember one of the women I used to work with, she would always get upset that I would always comment on ways to make processes work better at work.
Yeah.
And eventually she left that company, and I was talking to her once afterwards, and she said she went to like a Marie Callender's to order a pie to go.
Yeah.
And the process, it took so long for them to do the orders, to do the takeout, all that kind of stuff. She was in her mind figuring out how to fix their process.
Yeah. I did that all the time. I do it all the time. Yeah, exactly. I mean, how hard is it? Just get the frickin' pie, put it in a box, and take my credit card and be done, right? I mean, what is so hard about this?
Okay, Scott, Now steel man that argument. Why is it hard?
It's hard because the person at the front desk is like, that's not my job. I'm like, look, my job is to handle the customers coming in and get them assigned to a table, and I'm so backed up. And then in addition to that, now you want me to get a pie for somebody? That's not my job.
That's not my job. I'm not taught how to do that.
Yeah, I'm not
I
taught
don't
how to
know
do
how to
it.
do that. I'll get in trouble if I do that. I mean,
That's
you can come
right.
up with a lot of reasons why someone doesn't do what you think
Yeah.
would be the best.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, absolutely, actually. Yeah, yeah. That's where the whole Jocko thing is so important, right? You know Jocko, right?
Extreme ownership? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
that's his thing is, man, no matter if it's your problem or not, it's like you take responsibility of that problem. And if
Yeah.
you can't fix it yourself, say, hey guys, we're having trouble with pies. Can we all get together for 10 minutes and figure out this pie problem, you know?
Yeah.
There's assuming that the boss is aware enough to allow that kind of conversation to
Well,
happen.
that's a really bad assumption. You should not assume anything, Chris, because bad things happen when you assume things, especially when you combine it with systems thinking, you know?
Yeah.
But
Well,
that's how human
that's
beings
where
is.
I love the way you brought that in because I want to circle this back because I'm gonna jump off here in a moment.
Okay.
But to circle back to the big problems we were talking about with again for me homelessness, I would love to actually be able to solve that problem one day, and and by me taking personal responsibility, like meaning yeah, it's not my problem. I'm not homeless,
Yeah.
but like the problem's never gonna get solved that way.
Yeah,
So
right.
then now I get to go to, well, okay, well, what can I do? What would it be? And like, so I like the way that you go into that and really think like, well, why is this a problem over here? And why is it the way that is? And I think when we do more of that, then that's what ultimately just makes everything better. Because it's like we can I'm sure there's other people. I'm not probably the only one who would love to see homelessness end. And even though it doesn't personally affect me right now, I mean,
Right.
one of the reasons I'm passionate about it in the first place is that there was a time in my life where I was almost homeless and it could
Yeah.
have affected me a lot. And there's people
Yeah.
that I do know that it affects them. So
Yeah.
like, so it's like, just because it's like not my problem right now, then it becomes like, well, I guess I'm not going to worry about that.
Well, so here's what I would do, Tony. Here's what I would suggest you do, right? Because I think I can't, I don't know if you're a Christian or if you read the Bible or anything like that, but if you do, you'll know that this homeless problem is not new. It's been around since the beginning of time. So I would start to go back and look through patterns, and I'm what, what are the patterns? And you'll probably find a common set of patterns that are happening. And this is kind of how AI works. It doesn't really think, it's just pattern recognition. And then you
Right.
start absorbing these patterns. You're like, okay, now what causes those things to happen? You just start digging down until you hit the concrete. You're like, I can't dig anymore. So I know the problem is not deeper. It's the worst case, it's at this level and up. So at least you know where to start fixing it, solving. That's the way I would think through that problem.
Yeah, and I love that approach. And I'm also to circle back to where we started the conversation with AI. I'm looking forward to letting go some of my bandwidth to an AI to like, hey,
Yeah.
let's work on this together. Let's collaborate. Because I
See,
know there's probably things that you can
yes.
do that I just can't.
Yeah.
And like really embrace the technology for those like, hey, let's
Yes.
solve some big
Yes.
freaking problems that we just
Yes.
haven't really been able to. Like you said, since the biblical days, we haven't been able to solve this problem. Well, what if we actually created the technology to be able to solve some of these problems? Or another thing I love is can we descale what is it like take the salt water? Like we have so much water, right? And we're over here
Yeah,
like, hey,
desalinated, right.
yeah,
Desalination. Yeah.
desalination.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
some of
yeah.
this stuff, like abundance of energy, water, like all this stuff. Like, come on, we got technology here. Let's
Yeah.
just use those additional IQ points that we get from an intelligence that can do some of this
Yeah,
stuff and like
so listen,
collaborate.
I want to pick out something you just said because I think it's really insightful, and I just changed my mind today about it. So I want to bring that out because you just said the same thing. I used to think of AI as a tool, and yeah, it is a tool actually, but it's a very sophisticated tool, and it's a tool that's actually smarter than me. It knows more stuff actually, and it can probably outthink me. So instead of thinking of it as a tool, like I'm the master and it's the servant, I think what you said is the right way to approach the problem is like, how can we work together? How can we collaborate together? That I think is how we've got to treat AI because it's not a screwdriver. It's way more important than a screwdriver.
I think that's where most people are still thinking it's a tool until they realize that it's not. And that's where it becomes like, holy shit, this is much bigger than a tool. Because yes, people were thinking of it as a tool,
It's a
and which is
tool.
why they're like, yeah. And if you think of it as a tool, it's like, but no, a tool a tool, generally speaking, cannot outsmart its master.
Yes, right. So
I
we're
would
in relationship with this thing.
Mm, I would still call it a tool until it has the ability to act on its own, truly act on its own. Right now, everything's done through guidance with us. So we are still the master from that perspective. At the point where we release that and let it develop on its own, and you could argue that some of the research it does for like cancer research and stuff is kind of that, but it's still guided by a human at some point. I think
Well,
at
no, it's
that
still
point,
guided, right.
at that point, I would no longer consider it a tool. It as powerful as it is, right? I mean, a car is more powerful than I am. A gun is more powerful than I am. They're all tools still.
Yeah.
So I still view it as a tool until it has that kind of autonomy. And that, of course, is one of the scariest aspects of AI is the autonomy.
But here's the thing though, Chris, and I just got this because I spend like 3 hours a day talking to this like crazy AI thing. I think though, if you have that mental model, which is something we should talk about mental models as well too, moving forward. But if you have that model, I think it's going to start doing a lot more for you. And so even though it may still be a tool, right? I get that. And I agree with you on that. But if you start thinking of it as a collaboration, I think you can get it to do way more stuff for you than.
Oh, I already think of it as a collaboration. I actually think of it as a repository that's able to do things that I can't do.
Yeah.
I already think about it from that aspect. I ask it to do things that I don't want to do or can't do all the time.
Right.
And I think
Tony,
one of the other important parts, and going back to the book, The Scary Smart, right? He brings up a really important part of like why people are fearful of AI and stuff in the first place. It's because of that, the actual thought of it of being a tool, even though it, like you said, Chris, technically it is right now. It's like thinking of it as a tool right now might mean you don't treat it in a way that it will not be a tool in the future if and when, most likely it's not an if it's question anymore, it's a when it does that. And now it's, so if you're still treating it like a tool and then it's like, well, one day this thing is actually not, and if collectively we're all doing that, then it's like, well, okay, so these people think I'm a tool. Why should I really
Yep.
like it's not having that level of respect where as a partnership is much different.
Do you use
How you
please?
interact
Do you
with
use
things.
please and thank you when you talk to AI?
I do.
I do.
I do too. More times
Yes.
and it even told me you don't need to do that, but I still
So,
do it.
but I also find on
Yeah.
certain LLMs, I use more polite language than others.
It depends on how
Claude,
it talks to me, right? Is how I
Claude,
treat
I
it.
use more polite language with than chat.
Yeah.
Grok, I use more guttural language with.
Yeah.
So it really there's a change there. Tony, I wanted to bring up something that came up in Toastmasters today. Our president mentioned cohabitation as a great thing, and it got me to thinking. There are several experiments around the world, and they've been proven, where there's like an apartment building, and it's designed. They pick the people that live there to build like a mini community. So there's a few older people, there's a few younger people, there's a few married couples, there's people with kids, there's people without kids, and they're required. They get a good price on living there, but they are required like once a week or once every 2 weeks to eat dinner together, to do things together, and it actually forms a bonding community.
Yes,
So that when the parents have to stay late at work, when someone else will help take care of the kids, or when someone gets sick, someone else. So it really builds that kind of like extended family almost. And I've seen a lot of experiments that seem to really work that way.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that would be an interesting thing to try out. You know, since you're one of your businesses was real estate, I was like, that sounds like it might be a really. I've heard in Texas there's a whole neighborhood that's this way, and so they're actually houses, but they build the houses and who lives in them. They have a quota basically to build a certain kind of cultural culture there. I think that'd be an interesting experiment to do in the in the longer term. Kind of neat to see.
I think that'd be great because at our core we're pack animals, right? We tribe up, right? Yeah. So I mean that's just how our DNA made. So we should probably build our environments to sort of model
Embrace
that.
it.
That one in Texas I was talking about, someone went her 13-year-old kid would always go to see the old retired woman in her 70s who lived down the street and help her with her garden and help get groceries out of the car, that sort of thing, and saying that kid learned more from her.
Oh yeah.
As far as history and experiences and just a better understanding of the world in general because of that. And we don't have that the way we are today. It's almost like we don't have tribes and families anymore because of the way we live in America. So we need to go out of our way to build tribes and families.
And that's
100%. Yeah.
interesting, Chris, because I'll tell you, when I moved to Arkansas, it's much more like that than in South Orange County. People are
Yeah.
literally, they'll just come by and, oh, I thought of you, so I'm going to bring you some food, or they know you're sick.
Mm.
I
so
think
they
the
come
East
by,
Coast
right?
and the West Coast are more liberal and modern, and therefore that usually means smaller, more independent groups.
Mhm.
More
I noticed
independent
that's where
people.
more of the homeless population exists.
Yeah.
Oh, I wonder if
Yeah.
that's tied to it. Maybe
Well,
it's community that's the
it
problem.
used to be that
Or
the
a
church.
problem.
It used to be the church fixed that. The church would
Yeah,
address
yeah,
that, right?
yeah.
And then what
Yeah.
ended up happening was the government took over that role, and so churches don't do that as much as they used to. And yeah, the church doing it comes with all kinds of strings attached. I get it, but it means the problem didn't exist, or at least didn't exist in the same levels.
To this
So
extent, yeah.
what has changed to make it more prevalent isn't just things that have gotten worse. It's things that made it less of a problem are gone as well. So again, it's multi-layered. So all those things we mentioned as the cause of homelessness.
Say that
It's
last
not
part
just
again.
that things have gotten worse, like economy and drugs and mental illness and not having the asylums anymore. Well, actually, the asylums anymore is the second part. Who took care of them in the past? The churches, the not-for-profits, all those things. And a lot of that's been taken away and given to the government to take care of. And as soon as individuals washed their hands of that and said, no, we don't want churches to have that kind of power anymore or have that kind of influence anymore, then what you ended up with was now the only way to fix that is through government. And the government's okay at some things, but it's not good at a lot of things.
Well, who said that? Because all I know is churches everywhere, including Orange County here. That's their fundamental function.
They
right?
do it, but they were the safety net for a long time.
Oh yeah,
right?
no, absolutely, yeah, no,
and
absolutely.
Usually, if you're relying on the church, yes, there's a lot of racism that was going on. There's a lot of expectations of you joining the church and being a member of it, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
At the same time, it was a method that the society had to take care of itself.
Yeah,
Right? And it was very tribal in the sense that I'm part of this group or part of that group. And as we went through the idea that no, it's the individual that counts, not the group identity, as that became the norm through, I think, probably the 50s on, maybe after World War II on, then you ended up with a lot of changes and expectations on the organizations. We used to expect the church to do so much for the community. Now we expect the government to do a lot of that.
I just have a crazy idea, Chris. I actually agree with you on this point. I mean, it's insane.
Well, it would make sense that you would agree with greatness quite often.
Yeah, exactly. That is so true though, because I think in terms of systems, I think you want distributed systems, so they're very, very robust. So if a little bit of the system breaks, right, it doesn't affect anything else. And I think proximity is so important to this. Just like our money guy that came on, he's like, you want to be close to the problem so you understand it better.
Have you ever seen or have you ever heard about how like Mormon religion takes care of poor people within their groups?
Mm-mm.
So they have like their own little food pantry set up by the church so that people can come get whatever they need. But the family that's having financial problems sits down with the head of that local church or whatever, the shrine or whatever they use, a temple, and they do financial planning. They sit down with someone who's having, and they do financial planning. As like, this is the expectation as you're part of our community. You owe us things. We owe you protecting you, but you owe us stuff as well. I mean, I find that a lot of tight-knit religious groups, I think to a great extent, there's a lot of religious groups that are this way, have that social pressure on each other. Yeah. Which people always say peer pressure is a bad thing, but I think sometimes it's a good thing because it raises the bar of expectation on what you have to do to be part of society.
Yeah.
It's stressful, and I understand why people want to be homeless and not have to deal with that pressure. But at the same time, for society's sake, that pressure raises everyone to at least a certain level of interaction.
No, I think that's really good because there's expectations. Like, we're going to come in the tribe, we're going to come in and take care of you, but boy, it's not free, right? We have certain expectations from you.
And that's where I think the individualism of America today, in individual rights, to the point where we've broken apart the nuclear family, we've broken apart the larger extended families, because the way we live our lives and our value system. That's one of the second or third order consequences of having a society of individuals to the level we're individual. We've broken away a lot of the social interaction.
Yeah, and I agree. I think, and I'm going to take it back to God for a second, actually, but I believe that God set this structure up through the Bible. He's like, you're supposed to behave this way, because not because I said so, but just because this is how it's supposed to work actually. And then if you break this thing or you don't do this thing, bad things will happen. Second, third, fourth order consequences, right? Then you get more homeless, you get more of this, you get all sorts of problems.
But this is why usually liberal viewpoints have a hard time with religion and God, is like, if we believe that something like the family unit or the tribal unit is important because it helps protect, it helps the group survive when bad things happen to one person, right? But that means that you now have requirements with each other that you wouldn't normally have, and you may have a pecking order of social roles.
Of course,
right?
Absolutely.
And that means that now not only am I beholden to you as part of society, but now I might be second to you or third to you or fourth to you or fifth to you in this pecking order. And that goes against the individual viewpoint that's so prevalent today in America. So it's really tough for someone who is very liberal to also have very those types of conservative values, because that conservationism means the individual is less important than the group.
Yeah, but you'll do it though because you get safety, right? It's like the control that you give up, you get more and back in your mind, right?
But today you are the individual unit, which means the money you make to take care of yourself, your voting, your politics, your opinions are all yours. When the family was the unit, the family had an opinion, regardless of what the individuals thought inside. The family had its finances, right? But that means then that not everyone in the family is equal. And that was the problem with the men and women's roles in those families, right? Children were always secondary to that. And then in a tribe, you have the elders and the shamans and those types of people who were the ones who had all the power. So you give up power for safety.
Yes, but oh, sorry, I'm not supposed to say but. And it's like, if that's a good shaman or a good leader, he's not selfish. He loves everybody else, and he's like, I'm willing to sacrifice myself for you. That's like a servant leadership thing.
That's the good leader. That's the good leader.
That's powerful, right? That's powerful.
Yes.
Tony, I know you wanted to leave like 20 minutes ago.
Oh, like 45 minutes.
Yeah, I got a hard cutoff here in a minute, but this was fun. I mean, I'm just so enrolled in all this like conversation. So I mean, like, I wish I had more time to just keep doing this, because this is I see why you guys do this. This is a rabbit hole of you can get.
Well, I think a big part of this is, regardless of whether or not Scott and I agree, if I can understand his thought process, it widens my ability to understand other people in general, right? I often say when you're 90% aligned with someone, those 10% difference becomes drastic. It becomes That's why we yell at each other all the time. If you're only 10% aligned with someone, you've got 90% of disagreement. You don't care as much.
You don't even bother talking to them.
I care. You know, I care to improve Scott's thinking, because he's wrong so often.
Well, I am, and I will tell you, Chris, I appreciate that, actually. But here's something you taught me. Listen, you got to. This is something I owe you. I was just thinking about this today, actually. Is I've always thought in terms of that you want to see it from the other person's point of view, right? Seek first to understand and then be understood. I can't remember who that's like one of the 7 principles. Like Stephen Covey, I think, right?
Covey, yes.
So Chris, Covey. I always took that as a concept. But what you did with you always say steel man the other person's argument. That's a tactic to support that general belief, that higher level thing. That's jujitsu in action, man. That's awesome. You know,
I wrote a LinkedIn article about this. One of them is that everyone is logical. They just have different facts. Is one article I have, and I introduce the idea of give everyone grace to understand that their mind works just like your mind. It's just that they don't have the same they're not using the same information you're using to get to your conclusions. And if you start with that, then it's a lot easier to steel man that. So the second article I wrote this week was steel man versus straw man, why one is better than the other. Right. So, and I explained what a straw man is, what a steel man is, and then what the value of being able to steel man a conversation is. So
at least I mean, in my mind, I wouldn't use that fancy. I'm just like, oh, I'm going to go over there and like let me see the world from their perspective. That's kind of my thing. But what you're doing is you have a very tactical way of doing that, which is a beautiful thing.
Well, by saying it that quickly, you get what I mean right away. I don't have to say, oh, to think of it from their perspective. I say, steel man it, go. And you know exactly what
but I didn't get it before a few days ago. I mean, so I've sort of like grown a little bit, actually. And I'm starting to understand you a little bit.
When I first heard the term straw man, I heard it in the context of someone using it in an argument, and I thought it was a good thing to straw man an argument. then I realized it's actually a way to attack the other side. You
Yeah.
belittle their argument so you could take it down.
Yeah.
And then I guess in the last year and a half, 2 years, I learned the term steel man, and I'm like, that's what I've been doing for years in my mind, and I just didn't have a term for it.
Yeah. That's right. Because you have so linguistically, you can't even see it unless you can describe it and use a set of words to describe it. I mean, I heard, I don't know if it's true or not, but these natives, like way back when, it's like they could see something out there, but they didn't know it was a ship. So to them, it wasn't even real because they've never seen this thing before. So that is so interesting. That means we've got to have language to understand something, which means we've got to define it carefully and get to the cardia, to get to the heart of it, to get to understand this thing deeply.
Well, seeing something and knowing something, knowing and understanding are two different things, right?
Totally different. Like I
know there's a bump on the horizon.
Yes, right.
But I don't understand what it is.
Right, exactly. But hopefully your mind will be curious. You're like, what is that thing? You know, what is that? And the same way, maybe it's a little different. Like, I'm going to use a cat example. Like, so if you haven't had cats, you probably know, oh, that's a cat. You can immediately point it out, but you don't know much about the nature of that cat. You don't know what the cat will do, what it doesn't do. If you haven't lived with a cat for a few years, it's like you don't fully understand what a cat is.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what a cat is. I don't understand what a cat is. Right? The distinction there.
Yeah.
And the problem with no one understands is
in a cat's paws.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So so is this a good spot to wrap up then? This was like a good, exciting. Hopefully we get some good clips out of this.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. So thanks,
this
Tony.
Was fun, guys.
Thanks.
Appreciate you having me. I'd love to be back on another time and go over some other things.
What I would really like to do, Tony,
hole.
I'd like to talk to you about how you're using AI in your business, because I know you've talked about how you're automating things and using it, or because I think that's one of the things that Scott's working on that as part of his business, and just talking about how you identify where am I going to use it, I think is an interesting thought, because I think that in and of itself is a critical thinking process for you to figure out how am I going to use it, where am I going to use it, all that sort of thing. So I'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, just one last thing though. What's your software stack? I mean, just you don't have to explain it. I'm just curious what you're currently using right now.
Right now, I would say majority of the time, Chat GPT, Notebook LM, and top three is another. It's more of a task management system called Motion.
Okay.
Yeah. So those are the top three.
Are you using like Make or N8N at all?
Zapier, but
okay, a little bit of Zapier, yeah.
not as much as I would like to, because I know there's a lot more I can tap into.
But that's
there.
in the same field. That Zapier's at least it takes these other things and these other black boxes, in my mind, it literally hooks them up and makes them talk to each other.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, so that's Chris. Are we going to wrap this thing up? This is a great podcast.
I think we're going to wrap this up. So everyone, comments. Tell Scott how he's wrong. Tell me how I'm right, and definitely subscribe. We want subscribers, and I think we mentioned in the past, but you noticed that we did change the name of the podcast. It's How to Think Better Podcast. People were looking up logos and thinking that they were corporate logos and not logic. So
it's called hand-drawn logos. Everybody's like, "Oh, you make hand-drawn logos?" It's like, no.
All right, and with that, Tony, thanks. Come back soon.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank
I'm
you,
gonna
guys.
call it quits here. Well, maybe.
See you guys.
Stop.